Hello and welcome to GreenBytes Wednesdays. GreenBytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations and steer consciousness when it comes to understanding the impact of our digital footprint across Nigeria's technology ecosystem. We hope that with this advanced knowledge, we can introduce you to some tools, trends, and best practices that can enhance your knowledge about digital sustainability. Are you curious about climate change? Are you a tech enthusiast or a climate entrepreneur? Come on board and learn on this episode as we get on with every conversation of the GreenBytes Wednesday podcast series. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. My name is Sheikumi Adibote and I am glad to be your host. Welcome on board. It is very easy for us to say, let's put it this way. When you hear climate change, you probably say to yourself, oh, it's the government's problem. The government is not doing enough, or the government needs to solve the problem. Other people would say, it's the international people. They need to give us the money, or they cause the problem and they have to solve it. But not many people are talking about your own role as an average Nigerian, as a citizen. What is your own role when it comes to addressing the problem? And this brings us to the topic for today, a citizen-driven path to net zero. How can we achieve net zero? Yes, the government has a part to play. Yes, we need collaboration from the international partners, especially as we drive this decarbonization, as we call it. How do we reduce our carbon emission? What are the policies? What are the commitments? Despite the urgency, are we really doing so much? Will it make a difference if you, as an average Nigerian, you may call yourself, will it make a difference if you do something different, if you take some sort of action? That's exactly what we delve into on the conversation today. I'm so honored to have with me Omono Okonkwo. I hope I pronounce it right.
Omono
Okonkwo. Exactly. And we'll be talking about the citizen-driven path to net zero emissions. Omono serves currently as the head of operations at the Electricity Hub. She's been working with huge, very skilled people in putting together the power dialogue, which has been on for quite some time. I like to think of myself as a friend of the house. But away from that, she's also an energy communicator. She's a trained journalist, and over 12 years experience. She's been working across different sectors: oil and gas, energy, climate sustainability. So just imagine the wealth of experience that she brings to the conversation today. Welcome, Omono.
Thank you very much, Shay, for having me today.
It is our pleasure. I know it was quite tricky and difficult to get you, so we are very, very honored to have you on GreenBytes Wednesday. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. And how are you?
Yes, I'm well. So like I said, it's very easy. You probably see this every time. When we talk about climate change, we talk about environmental issues. People are like, it's not my problem. It's the government, it's the private sector, it's the businesses. And that's why we need to then start off this episode series by letting people know that, hey, you have a role to play. So I think we should start with the concept of net zero, but that may be technical. But let's start with, imagine you were speaking, to 500 people out there, 500 people who will typically say, climate change is not my problem. How would you get into conversations with them?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. And like you said, the general idea or the general perception out there is, oh, climate change has nothing to do with me as a person. It's the government's problem. But I would like to state that the climate is just, the weather, right? And as the climate change affects everyone, it affects not just countries as a whole, it affects you as an individual. So for instance, there is a flood and it's around where you stay. Of course, you're going to evacuate, right? Of course, you're not going to be able to drive your car or even go where you want to go at a certain time, right? So you need to pay attention to the things you're doing every single day so you can contribute to the fight against climate change. I think it's best if all of us have that thought in our head as we do or as we go about our daily activities. Now, if I were speaking to 500 people and I want to tell them, oh, you have a role to play in the fight against climate change, I would say your everyday habits will play a role, right? As the government is out there seeking for collaborations, partnerships, seeking for funding for whatever climate smart practices they want to engage in, you as a person on a daily basis, okay, you want to take your bath, right? And you want to make use of warm water. Do you really have to leave your heater on from the night before to the next morning you want to use it, right? So you can put on your heater for 30 minutes. And by the time you want to take a bath, your water is hot. And that's fine, right? And then let's go to the use of refrigerators. We always have this, idea in Nigeria, like, oh yes, I'm going to freeze everything that I need to freeze, and I'm going to leave my freezer on for as long as I see light from my disco, right? But then when you discover that your refrigerator is frozen, and you literally have to drag stuff out of your freezer, right?
Break some plastic
Exactly.
sometimes.
So
yeah?
at that point, you can turn it off. And you're home, right? It's not like you're going out, right? If you're home, you can turn it off for maybe like an hour or two. And even for those that are prepaid meter users, it even helps you to save money on the costs for recharging your meter, right? You can turn it on and off at intervals and during the day, right? Or even overnight. Before you go to bed, you can say, okay, I'm going to bed by 9 p.m. I know I'm going to wake up maybe to check on my kids by midnight. Maybe between now and midnight, I can just turn off my refrigerator, right? And then let's talk about waste management. So you have your trash, which you bring out of your house every week, maybe for the trash guys to pick up, right? Do you really have to dispose of your plastic in the same basket or the same bowl or whatever, or trash bag that takes your maybe food waste, right? You can put them apart. And that's something that a lot of people in developed countries do. So why don't we also adopt that practice here in Nigeria? You can have a trash bag for your plastics, and you can have a trash bag for other things like your food waste. And even that food waste, you can also reach out to people that are into waste management. They will tell you exactly how to make use of that food waste. You give it to them. There are many of them across Nigeria, small businesses that are practicing the waste management thing, right? So you give it to them. They know exactly how to make use of that waste. And then you have what they call this, the pure water sachets, right? There is this fantastic lady in Ibadan. She's doing fantastic with pure water sachet. Adejoke Lasisi. Exactly, Planetary Owl. Thank you very much. So she takes all those bags and she turns them into finished products like dresses, bags, backpacks, and the rest of it.
Bags and
laptop bags,
shoes, sandals.
Exactly. So if you are putting those sachet bags in the same place as you put your food waste, that's something that's unusable, right? So if you separate them and you just pack them up and hand them over to waste management businesses or startups, that's a practical way to get in with the climate change program, the fight against climate change.
Yeah. You started very hot, and I really love that. Like, you just went all in, and you already answered the question I would have asked next, which is around some of the impactful changes that individuals can take in their daily life. But there is one part that you probably haven't touched on, and I really would need you to reflect on that, especially if we put in context that this podcast series will, more or less focus on digitization. And we are, everyday users of digital apps and tools, whether we like it or not, from, WhatsApp and watching this on YouTube or listening on any platform to getting a ride and moving from place to place or ordering food. These are how our lives are very, daily connected to digitization. So can you also, just building on what you've said, make some connection with digitization or the digital landscape?
Okay, so the digital landscape, as far as that goes, uh, we have, in fact, there is barely any Nigerian now that has a smartphone that is not a WhatsApp user. So we're all WhatsApp users, right? So it is fantastic that people like you in this climate space, you have WhatsApp groups where you talk about actions people can take, actions businesses can take, actions that schools and groups, business groups and associations can take in the fight against climate change. Now, we all know that a lot of Gen Zs, they are on Twitter, they are Twitter users, they are Instagram users, TikTok users. Now, these are platforms that people go to, they spend hours every day just on TikTok, watching videos, on Instagram, watching videos. Now we can take those platforms and put out climate focused content on those platforms. But then it's not just putting out the content. We have diverse people around the world and not just Nigeria. People are interested in different kinds of things. There are people that go on Instagram, they want to watch skits. Yeah, this short dramatization where people pass a message. Now, skits are fantastic. They're done by recognizable faces. Now, what stops the government, maybe the National Orientation Agency, partnering with the federal government and maybe a development organization? They say, okay, we want to reach out to Brain Jotter and maybe other skit makers and say Sydney Talker and the rest of the guys that, people really like, both the young and the old. And we tell them, okay, we want to do this 6-month campaign on climate change, right? But make it interesting, make it relatable, make it something that when people watch it, they're like, oh my God, I didn't know about this. It could be about trash disposals. It could be about how to dispose of, if you're a hairdresser, how to dispose of your hairs. Because I was living in Lagos at some point and it was crazy because on the island where I lived close to Lekki Conservation, you would literally see hairdressers, they're trying to dispose of hairs, leftover hairs, attachments and, weave-ons. And they would take the hairs and just dump them in the gutter. Right? I feel like there are better ways. Like if we can get the hairdressers to understand that, maybe we have a skit on hairdressing. And the person says, maybe the person goes and tries to dump it in the gutter and someone says, no, now, this is not the way. Don't you know that if you submit it or you give it to these guys, they'll give you money self.
Absolutely.
A lot of people will now become aware. A lot of hairdressers will now be like, oh my God, I've been doing it the wrong way. And I can even make a little money on the side, to recharge my phone or something like
absolutely.
that.
Let me jump in there. You touch on two things there. The role of infrastructure, of setting up systems that say, hey, don't do this way. This is the right way to do it.
Yeah.
You also touched on incentivization or incentives, sort of incentivizing people to say, hey, instead of doing this and, causing problems to our environment, you can do something smarter and even a lot more.
Exactly.
But we'll get to the role of infrastructure and incentives in a bit, because I strongly believe that it's really difficult to say, hey, people should do good because it's just good to do good. Sometimes you need to put infrastructures in place that enables them to do good or to take the right actions. Other times it is incentives. You need to tell them, hey, you're losing if you do it in the typical way. There are smarter ways to do this and that you can earn. But before we delve into that, I wanted to reflect a little bit on how you talked about the role of skit makers in communicating this. I'm not making any advertisement, but I know that Taoma, for example, was appointed some time ago as a climate change ambassador by the Lagos state government. And that really sparked a lot of reaction. Some people were like, why is it Taoma? And other people were like, yeah, we need to see content from her that is environment. So it was like a bit divisive, but I just reflected on that now that you gave this example, which is a very, I would say, smart way to get a lot of people really taking action. Because right now what we have is, we have conversations that says, hey, this is urgent, we need to take action. But we have millions of Nigerians out there that are just disengaged and they just don't care.
They don't care.
And sometimes they don't care because they don't
know. Yeah.
So we do hope that conversations like this can help people to know first, but also to care. And not just in caring, to then talk about infrastructures, know about tools and trends, and also to see ways that we can incentivize them. You've shared quite a lot, especially when it comes to this citizen, what to do. But then let's move to the other part of this conversation, which is the concept of net zero emissions. What exactly, how would you simplify it to someone, who's rather disengaged or who, like a secondary school? You know the way they say, explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old. How would you
Okay.
explain net zero emissions? Maybe as a 10-year-old now.
Okay, fine. Well, you know, in life, human activities will always need energy, right? In this sense, I mean fuel to drive your car, power to power your devices and your home at night and other times of the day. And then the energy source is how you determine what is net zero or not, right? So when you hear net zero emissions, we mean no carbon emitted into the atmosphere. Now, carbon is a chemical or a gas that is polluting or damaging to the planet. Now we have alternatives. So for instance, in vehicles, you have internal combustion engine vehicles, ICE vehicles, that you need to buy petrol to put in them and to move the car or the vehicle. But then you have electric vehicles that you only need electricity. And if you put both of them together, right, driving an ICE vehicle will emit carbon into the atmosphere. And that always leads to climate change impacts, right? But then when you drive electric vehicles, you are emitting no carbon into the atmosphere. Now, when you look at oil and gas, you have crude oil, you have to drill into the soil to get it, and then you have to refine it. And at the refineries, carbon is being emitted into the atmosphere. At the end of the day, that carbon comes back to bite us as climate change impacts. Droughts, desertification, floods, and the rest of it, right? And then you have natural gas. Natural gas is a lesser evil than crude oil. Yes.
Lesser evil.
Yeah, it's
Also.
a lesser evil because where gas processing as opposed to oil refining emits less carbon, right? But some countries will tell you they prefer to use natural gas because natural gas is a fossil fuel like oil, but then it is more efficient, right, than, let's say, renewable energy systems. Renewable energy is anything that is renewable naturally. You don't have to drill into the soil to get it. It's renewable, like the sun, right? The sun is always shining and you can, harness its energy and store it and use that as your energy source later on, right? But then if you are thinking about the general idea of climate change in a country like Nigeria, Nigeria is an oil and gas country, mostly, especially a gas country, right? And we have over 200 million people, still growing, and we need energy, right? But then people have said, oh, well, we are an oil and gas country, let's just focus on oil and gas. But at the end of the day, we are also facing climate change impacts. So some people who have put themselves in the middle of this conversation will tell you, oh, let's do a little bit of oil and gas, and let's do some renewables, so we can have energy sufficiency, which is the most important thing, energy access, right?
Okay, not to dwell so much on the energy space, because I could also think about this also across the 7 indices, the nationally determined contribution.
Yes.
We have oil and gas, we have industry, we have power, we have agriculture, food and land use, we have waste and water that has been recently added. But to sum it up, what I hear you say is carbons are being emitted across all these sectors.
Yes.
And some people have argued that the concept of net zero is like, yeah, we have to emit, but we also need to, compensate for it, and we need to plant trees. What do you make of that argument? That yeah, if we plant enough trees, then it doesn't matter how much we emit.
Well, no, I don't agree. You know why? Because it goes beyond planting trees, right? If you're thinking, how can we ensure that we are actively fighting against climate change? We're taking climate action, right? It goes beyond planting trees. First off, it's education and awareness, right? And just to say, Nigeria is not just an urban-based country. We have people living in remote areas as well, rural communities, right? So when you're thinking on that level, you need to include both urban and rural dwellers. So it's not just about planting trees. Yeah, we can plant trees in Abuja, we can plant trees everywhere else. But then rural communities, what about them? Yeah. So first off, for me, it starts with education and awareness and human capital development. Now, stay with me. If you go to a rural community, for instance, and you see people, oh yeah, you have some skilled people, they do local stuff and they make hair and they grind stuff and they are farmers, right? You can't just go to them and say, oh yeah, we are fighting against climate change and I want you to come learn how to plant a tree. No, they don't speak that language. Farmers, what language do they speak? Desertification affects them more, right? So they are thinking irrigation systems. They need water, especially in northern Nigeria where they're facing acute desertification, right? They need water. Now, if you introduce a mini grid, a solar mini grid in that community, and you say, okay, this solar mini grid is going to power irrigation systems for you. So all year you have water access for your crop, for your seasons, right? When you want to plant. Yeah. That is their language, right? Now, if you go to another community, maybe rural communities within urban communities, that's a thing, right? Where you go to a place like Asokoro in Abuja, that's for the high and mighty. And then behind Asokoro, I remember years ago when I was...
Place,
okay, fine. So, years ago, I was working as an intern at Daily Trust newspaper, and I was sent there to do an investigation, sort of. I remember that place, you have different kinds of people. So it's not just farmers, right? It's hairdressers. I know I'm mentioning hair a lot, sorry. So it's hairdressers, yeah. So you need to speak a general language for them. Now imagine that community, they don't have electricity access. I'm just saying, right? No, it's not like they don't have, they do have. But for instance, that kind of community where you have a mix, because there are some communities that are farming communities. That's just for farmers. But then there are some communities within the urban areas that are a mix of people. For instance, you take a mini grid there and you say, okay, yeah, so we're doing like this thing that the Rural Electrification Agency is doing, productive use. So they install a mini grid and it's mainly to power productive use. Yeah. So the hairdressers, they have lights to power their tools, the fish sellers, exactly, refrigerators, cold room. Thank you. Exactly. Yeah. So that is speaking their language. They don't have to leave that community. They can have everything they want and they have the people, they have the population, they make money and they can pay solar developers for that service. Yeah. So it goes beyond tree planting. Yeah. Also, as far as awareness goes, I'm thinking, for instance, this podcast, why can't we translate it in a local language?
Maybe we will.
Exactly. You take it to that viewing center in that particular rural community. You play it on a loop for them. They hear their language. Oh, their interest is piqued. And they're saying, oh, I want to listen to this because this person is speaking my language, right? So you're telling them, oh, this thing you do, maybe throwing trash in the gutters, and when rain starts falling, the gutters are flooded or the way is flooded and water cannot flow. At the end of the day, your place is flooded. You should stop dumping trash in that because it translates to what you will see in the future, right? So that is appealing to them through their local language. So, I mean, if you're able to appeal to Nigerians across different states in their local languages, I don't think you should waste all that information on just tree planting. It goes beyond that.
Wow, thank you so much. You know what are the reason now? Maybe the next series, maybe we'll just dey do PJ, maybe we'll just dey yarn PJ about this climate change.
Abby?
But yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really good idea. And I really like and appreciate how you sort of pick different sector within the society and sort of show the connection. But like I said when we started, we cannot exhaust this conversation about getting the average Nigerian out there to become more climate minded or environmentally friendly if we do not talk about infrastructures and incentives. So I'm thinking, okay, are there some infrastructural, um, innovations that you've seen that makes you feel like, yes, we need more of this to get people to become more environmentally friendly? Or are there some that you're thinking in your head, like, if we could have this, if we could have that, maybe more people will embrace this message of net zero, climate change, smart digitization approach?
Okay, so Shay, I like thinking in terms of community because, everywhere you go, there is a community, right? Just like, Nigeria is a country, of course, we have different states, we have different municipalities, and, but then every community is unique in its own way. Let me give you an example. So I am from Edo State, and in Benin City, the capital, you have women who sell in Oba Market, for instance. That Oba Market is a community. So they identify themselves. I'm sure by now, all the traders there, they probably have a WhatsApp group where they all gather to, to exchange ideas or, to fight and stuff like that, resolve the fights. And if we are thinking of maybe flooding, market spaces, local open market spaces are pollution centers, so to speak, based on habits. Like I said, the trash disposal. Imagine if, for instance, urban market women decide, okay, so we've noticed that in this market, people like to dump trash in these gutters, right? And when it rains, this whole place is flooded and it's messy. Let's crowdfund. Let's crowdfund and make sure that every week or every other week, we are clearing these gutters and putting up signs telling people, hey, you can't do that here. Now, here is an alternative. Maybe this is a place where you can dump your trash. And we even segregate it. We say, oh, all plastics go here and other trash go here.
Many people ask you why.
Do you understand? Now, if they can crowdfund amongst themselves, that is already setting up an infrastructure for urban markets in Benin City, right? I think at this point, maybe we should go back to digitization. Now, we've already talked about the use of smartphones and, people going on WhatsApp to exchange ideas, to speak about, what can we do? Or let's read this article or let's watch this video talking about climate action. But then we should also talk about business people who are too busy to own a smartphone. Trust me, that's a thing, especially in the Southeast. Many of these guys, they don't have time to be scrolling. I mean, they make use of small phones that are not smart. But then what about making them to have access to SMS-based messages? Just SMS. They do this a lot in East Africa, where you receive messages on your phone prompting you to do a certain thing. It doesn't mean that it will stick to everyone. But maybe out of 100, it can stick to like 40 people. That's progress as opposed to zero number of people, right? So if we can have, as we are making our smartphones busy, we are also making our smaller phones busy with SMS messaging from the Nigerian Orientation Agency and from other, development partners that want to make people aware. Now, that's also setting up infrastructure based on person-to-person messaging and stuff like that.
Allow me to cut in here. We'll move into the innovation part, the incentive part rather, as we close out. But this innovation and infrastructure you reflected on reminds me of a young man in Kano who was, he did his feasibility studies and he saw that many of the farmers were using this, as we call it, palasa phone. I mean, phones that were not smart. And for them, he thought, okay, I will get all the data from NIMET. All they need to know is when is it going to rain, how much rain is coming. And then he sends text message to say, hey, it's not going to rain in April as you think. It's going to rain in August. So they can plan when they farm. And that, like you said, is speaking their language. They're
Yes.
excited about it.
Yes.
That makes sense to them.
And if they get that message in their local language, all the better. All the
Absolutely.
better.
Absolutely.
Which is why I insisted on community-based messaging or community-based approaches when it comes to reaching out to the people. And the skits I mentioned earlier, why not do a skit in Hausa language? Why not do the same skit in Yoruba language? Why not do the same skit in Ishekiri language? So when people see that, they're able to say, oh, my dad would love this because my dad doesn't speak English. And I send it to my dad, or I play it for my dad. And my dad is like, oh my God, so we've been doing this the wrong way all this while. So let's adjust.
And you discussed it at the village meeting.
Exactly. That's how you create a ripple effect on climate action. So it goes beyond planting trees in schools. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But you need to reach the harder to reach parts of Nigeria.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Got it. And with all this, I think people out there are like really inspired right now. But hey, let's talk about incentives. Like I said, people will not do good because they just want to do good. And even though they understand all of this, they are energized and inspired based on what we've discussed in the last few minutes. Sometimes they are saying, yeah, but money is not there. So how do you think we can, or do you really think incentivizing citizens is a smart approach to getting them to embrace or to, edge towards net zero Nigeria?
Thank you very much, Shay. I don't think incentives are bad. I don't think they're a bad idea. But then we have to be realistic. Just how many people can you incentivize, though? But then I'm also thinking we can explain this whole thing and make people understand the gains they can make personally from some kind of habits that they change. So I already mentioned how they can, take their plastic waste to some people and they get a stipend for that. But then I also want people to think, especially those living in the urban areas, when you're leaving your house, you remove the sockets from the walls for your electrical appliances. That is you making a gain on recharging your prepaid meter. Because you won't spend as much money. Those are vampire devices. When they're plugged in, they will suck all your credits from your prepaid meter. So why not pay yourself by unplugging all your devices from the walls when you leave the house or when you want to travel? You'll be surprised. A lot of people, they have no idea for energy conservation or energy management. They don't even know. Some, they don't care because, the money is there. They're making a lot of money and they're like, oh, well, I just recharge whatever X amount of money every month, right? But you can actually save money. That money you expect someone to give you for, taking climate action. You can make it on your own. You can spend less on recharging your prepaid meter by making smarter decisions. Exactly. Unplug your sockets as you're going out. You're not watching anything. You're not charging anything. So unplug it. You pay less. You recharge less often, right? Also, when you segregate your trash, you're taking your food waste and your plastic waste to different people. You're giving the plastic to those that are into, recycling, and maybe your old laptops that don't work anymore. You're taking it to places, people like Dozier Igwilo of Quadloop to, dispose of it. And they make good use of those things, right? Even if they don't pay you. It is better. It's a better feeling for you because you know that you are contributing to the fight against climate change, as opposed to taking your laptop and dumping it in the trash. The same trash where your food waste is. That's ridiculous. So you are aware that this is for people living in urban areas, right? You're aware of all these small businesses and what they're trying to do. Why not help them? Give them your plastic waste. give them your old tires. There is a lady that turns old tires into beautiful furniture and other things, tiles and the rest of it. So give them your waste and you will feel better, honestly, as opposed to just dumping trash anywhere you find space.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I hear you say three types of incentives. Yes, is the financial incentives of taking your bottles and getting some money, but I see that you also reflect a little bit on the sort of the individual, that sense of responsibility of I take this or I unplug this or I do not turn on my water heater the night before I go to bed. And the third, as I understand, is the emotional incentive, that sense of feeling good about doing something that is right,
Something that is responsible.
that is responsible.
Yes.
And that's something you should keep in mind as we bring this conversation to a close. How will it make you feel if you do things that are responsible, if you do things that are smarter, not just for the environment, but also for you as an individual? So if you're not motivated by the finances or the money, maybe you will be motivated by that. Any closing words from you as we call it a wrap, Omono?
Well, my closing words would be we should focus a lot on human capital development, especially for people in rural areas, right? So, the urban areas, we have people, of course, we have climate activists and all that. But then in remote communities, what exactly do we have? We just have people coming from the urban areas to these places, maybe once a month or twice a month to talk to people. But then we need to transfer skills from the urban areas to the rural areas. So as we're taking action in the urban centers, the rural centers are also taking action. And then that action is, put together and Nigeria can meet its NDCs.
Absolutely. Thank you. And NDCs there is the National
Determined
Contribution. Because we try to make these conversations as simple as possible. But that's where we call it a wrap on this episode of GreenBytes Wednesday. I've been speaking with Omono Okonkwo, a veteran when it comes to conversations like this. She's the head of the Electricity Hub, and she's also been the one behind the Power Dialogues every month. A trained journalist, has worked in the oil and gas sector for over a decade. And you can tell from the conversation that she's brought wealth of experience, which I hope will inspire you to begin to take action. That's the aim of conversations like this. That's what we hope to do on GreenBytes Wednesday, to facilitate these critical conversations and to steer within you a consciousness to say, hey, I got to do something right. And I hope you will get on with doing something right while I say thank you to the team, to Ajibola, to Ayo, to Wonderful that has put this together. And a big thank you to the UK government for making it possible to bring these episodes and many more to you. My name is Sheifumi Adebote, and it's been a pleasure hosting this conversation. Get responsible, start doing something right, and bye for now. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of GreenBytes Wednesday. This podcast is brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, thanks to funding from the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Have you learned something new? Please share with your network, share with your friends, as I look forward to hosting you on yet another episode of GreenBytes Wednesday next week. Follow us on our social media platforms, check out our courses, test yourself, see how much you know, how much you're learning when it comes to digital and sustainability ecosystem in Nigeria. And I should remind you that as you balance your knowledge of digital ecosystem, also remember to stay committed to a shared and sustainable planet. My name is Sheikh Adebote. Bye for now.